I'm Megan, and thanks for joining me and Mr. Bones here for a somatic practice. It came to my attention this week that there's a famous area of the body that I've neglected. It's not the psoas. I have plenty of those videos. You can find those. This is the IT band and the TFL. So the TFL is a muscle, and if I'm going to put my finger right on it, it attaches to the back of your hip. So the iliac crest is here, and you can actually feel the bony part of your front of your hip and go right around the back. So that's your TFL, Tensor Fasciae Latae, and then it comes down, it's a hip stabilizer and a hip flexor, and it comes down and it basically becomes the IT band, which is a really strong band of fascial tissue. We want it to be strong, but recognize it's not muscle. It can't be stretched like muscle. So you'll often see people try to relieve pain in the IT band with myofascial release, using balls and such. Very successful, very good thing to do. In fact, we're going to do that at the end of our practice. So you can have a ball, a bigger, softer ball is great, or a rolled up yoga mat also works, so you can use that. But the other thing, the reason why I appreciate this somatic approach with this pain, and I've had this pain this week because I started running again, and I am a horseshit runner, and I really find that it causes a lot of discomfort in my body, but I can balance it with my somatics, because what I know is when I get the pain through my IT band, it's not just because it's my IT band, the entire side body starts to tighten up. So we see these full body patterns, and in somatic yoga, we address the full body patterns. So we'll also be working with the gluteus minimus and maximus, which are kind of partners with the TFL. You know, you can see they all play together nicely, or hopefully they do right here on the back of the hip. And then also the torso in general. So the torso, we tend to see you might have one leg that appears to be shorter than the other, or maybe one side body is slightly slouched, a shoulder lower. So you can even look at yourself in the mirror and see, is that side where there's discomfort or pain, does it look like it's shorter all around, not just the pain in the hip, right? So you can do that self-assessment. And then we're gonna start this practice today at the wall, and we'll need that book or whatever it is you're gonna stand on. So starting this practice at the wall, this is both a stretch you can do, but also I use this as an assessment. So that's why we're starting with this one. And you're gonna take your book or whatever it is you're gonna stand on, and I'll start with working with my left leg. So I'm gonna stand on the book with my right leg, and you can hold onto the wall for some balance. And you want a solid surface. I'm purposely not using a yoga block because they're really smushy and I want something a little bit harder. Then I'm going to lift up my left leg, and when I lift up my left leg, I want to imagine lifting it from my armpit and my hip, so I'm going to shorten the space between my armpit and my hip. So really get the side body muscles engaged too. Then I'm going to turn towards you. You're going to stay on the book, but you're going to turn your foot inward. So you're going to internally rotate your thigh just as far as you can go. And once we've got that, so we've got that lift and the internal rotation, we're actually activating, we're trying to activate that TFL. You're going to just take the foot to the front and then out to the side and to the back. And you're just going front and side and back. So that's why I'm having you hold on to the wall so you're not worried about balance. And keep that little bit of lift through the side body and internal rotation. What you're looking for is there discomfort in that, so somewhere in that outer hip? Just noticing. So we're using it first to assess because we're actually contracting those muscles that might already be tight, and we're using that IT band that might be trying to always help you and stabilize you when it doesn't need to. And then we're going to take that foot, let it drop down, relax for a moment. Now we'll take that leg, that left leg, and we're going to turn you can even turn your toes out a little bit if it feels better, but take the leg across the front, press the ball mound of the foot into the ground, and then see if you can take your left arm with the palm facing the wall and start to reach it up. If the elbow needs to bend, that's absolutely fine, but take your fingertips to the wall if you can. So what we're doing now is we're not only stretching the hip, we're getting into the side body. And notice if you feel tension or tightness through your hip and your leg, but also notice if you feel it in the side body, and just take a few breaths there. So this can be used as an assessment. It can also be used as a stretch. Just holding it there for as long as you'd like. But for the sake of the video, we'll do 1 or 2 more breaths here, and then we'll drop. And notice, did you feel any discomfort in the movement? Did you feel tightness when you went to stretch that side? Now let's compare it to the second side. So you're going to stand on your book with the left foot, and you just need a little bit of lift, so we're not dragging our foot on the floor. But then lift the right hip up and bring the armpit down so you're tightening those muscles through the torso, through the waist. Rotate your foot inward, so I'm turning my big toe towards my left foot. And then swing that leg forward and out to the side and back. And the other thing is, as I'm swinging the leg, I'm trying not to let my shoulders do this. I really want it to be an isolated movement from the hips. So the torso staying still. And so this is my tight side. And it takes me a lot more concentration, first of all, to even do this. But I can really feel it locking up. So for you, just notice, is there a difference in the 2 sides? Going back and forth a few times. And then we'll give it that relieving stretch. So we're actually contracting into the tight muscles here. So we let the foot and the hip fall. We want the waist to lengthen too, and then slide the right foot to the front. You can press into the ball mount of the right foot, so you're crossing the thighs. And then take that right hand, palm facing up. Elbow can bend if it's more comfortable for your shoulder, but reach, reach, reach. See if you can find the wall with the fingertips. Gently pressing fingertips into the wall. You can walk the toes towards the wall. And watch that you're not collapsing towards the wall, so you're not seeing my shoulder blade. I'm opening up my armpit towards you. Lucky you. And opening through that right side body. And you may or may not notice that there's more tightness through this side. So just a little assessment, a little stretch here to start. And we'll take a last breath. Take your arm down. Come off your pedestal. Okay, so we're going to be moving our way down onto the ground. Feel free to grab your mat or whatever you're going to be using underneath you, and also keep your ball and or your rolled up yoga mat handy. So we're going to come all the way down onto our back, and this first part is really just for mobility. It's what we call part of our gentle joint series. So come down onto your back with your knees bent and feet on the floor, and let yourself land into the floor. Locate any parts of your body touching the ground, including the soles of your feet, back of your head, shoulders and arms, the whole length of the spine. Then I'm going to encourage you to keep both legs bent, or the leg that's not moving, keep the foot on the floor so the low back can be longer and relaxed. But we're going to bring up just the left leg, and we want to keep the low leg relaxed and just hanging, and make circles with the kneecap. Think of making circles with the kneecap, but from the hip crease. So start really small, just addressing going out to the side, forward. So moving from that hip crease and just slightly across the body. So what I'm making sure I'm not doing is moving my hip from my leg. I'm not using my toes. I'm moving my hip from my hip. The lower leg is just dangling like dead weight. And I'm feeling the sense of moving from my hip crease, and you can switch the direction. If you're bumping into your right leg, just widen it out to the side. So just noticing again that range of mobility. So the TFL takes the leg inward, internally rotates it, but it also takes it out to the side. So we're just exploring this full range of motion in the hip. One last round, and then take it down. Let the legs relax. And then we're going to take this into a movement called walk in place. So your feet are going to be slightly wider than your hips. I have long arms, so I can reach my hands to my sides and feel that I can touch the outer ankle bones. Again, working with just the left leg first. Feel your left foot, particularly the big toe side of the foot. And if you want to do this to your breath, you can. As you breathe in, you're going to press into the big toe side of the left foot, draw the thigh bone, the femur, forward and inward. So you're stretching forward and inward, and you'll start to feel maybe just a little stretch in the outer hip, and then exhale and come back. So we're pressing forward and inward, and coming back. And first I'm starting by pressing into my foot. But then I want to see if I can make that same move more from my hip. So keep the foot quiet and relaxed and soft on the ground. Push the hip bone forward and inward. So a rotation. Because oftentimes in these body patterns, when there's the shortness in one side, the other part of the discomfort comes in body patterns where one side is a little bit more twisted or rotated, like a torque in one side. So we're rotating that pelvis, we're lengthening the left side and bringing it inward, and then exhaling back. So as I start to go further, I can go more into the big toe side of the foot, more of that internal rotation. Keep your head relaxed. Maybe your head wants to just roll towards your left shoulder. It's a nice thing to include the head. And then we can also add the arm. As I inhale and the foot comes in, and I come onto the big toe side, I'm going to reach the left arm overhead. So again, addressing this as a full body pattern through that whole left side. Feel the length all the way from the outer knee to your wrist, and then exhale, come back. So inhaling out and lengthening, and exhaling, relaxing. As we do these movements, anytime you want to just stop and hold, you can, but let that thigh bone be heavy. So I'll take a few where I'm actively reaching, pressing that thigh as far forward as I can. And then what's nice too is if you hold it for a few breaths, slowly come back up and release that tension through the left side. Let's do one more on the left side for good measure. And then come back down. Okay, so that was a warm-up for the next one, which is a rotational pattern. And this one you will want to take your right leg long, but see if you can keep your low back relaxed. If your low back lifts up all the way, that means your psoas is generally tight. So you want to put something underneath your right knee. You can put a bolster underneath it, put a little bend in that knee. And then we're going to place the left foot somewhere on the right thigh or shin, see what feels better for you, but let it feel something underneath it. And you can do this with or without your right hand, but I like to use my hand. Now as I inhale, I'm going to rotate all the way to the right. So I'm thinking of pressing my right hip into the ground, lifting my left hip up. Inhaling and exhaling and coming back. So we often do a twist very similar to this in yoga, but we're coming into it on the inhale. So going a little bit further towards that rotation that we did in that last one. Exhaling back. And I like to make sure that if the foot won't rest on the leg, you can also just keep it on the floor. But you don't want holding the leg up like this just doesn't help those muscles to relax, right? So the weight of the leg should be rested, either foot on the floor or foot on the leg. And you're rocking into it and coming out. And because we're going into it on the inhalation, this one too, if you want to slide that left arm overhead, creating space through that whole left waist, and exhale back. You'll notice my head likes to glide towards the left shoulder as I come into the twist, and back. A little self-adjustment I'll sometimes do as I'm rocking into the twist is taking my hand, my thumb and index finger, and gently pushing that left hip towards the front right corner of my mat, so I'm lengthening through the waist even more. And exhaling back. That's optional, of course. You could also just keep your arm to your side. So and a lot of times in a yoga twist, we use our hand to take our leg over. I want you to use the muscles to take your leg over. So your outer hip muscles, and then coming back. So the hand might be there just to guide or to gently press that hip crease forward. One or two more, or if you want to stop and hold it, you can hold it. And coming back. This is a moment of the pause. We love the pause in somatics, if you're new to somatics, because it's a chance for you to see, did you create any changes in your body? You could keep your knees bent, or if you want to take your legs long because that's comfortable, do that. But just feel your two sides of your body, left and right, whether it's the legs, the outer hips and thighs, the torso. Just be aware of any changes. And this is also the time when our nervous system is remapping us. So does one side feel lighter or heavier or longer or shorter? And these are really important because this is what makes the permanent changes. We can get manual adjustments up the wazoo and they do not permanently change our body. What has to change our body is our nervous system and the way it responds, the way it makes the muscles respond. Just pausing. And then we'll relax again. We're going to do the second side. So I'm going to stay facing this direction, but you're going to be working with your right leg, or whichever one you didn't do. Widen your feet a little bit towards the edges of the mat. Oh, sorry. First we're going to do our circles. So you're just going to lift that right leg up and make some circles with the right hip. So again, I like to keep my left foot on the floor because a lot of times if you extend the left leg, your low back is arching, and where you think you're relaxing, you're really not. You're tightening the psoas and some of the other hip flexors. You might feel tightness through the front of the hip. So keep that left leg bent and just explore circles through the right hip. And you can start small, or I imagine drawing circles with my kneecap, but I'm not using my low leg to move my hip. My low leg is dangling, and I'm focusing on initiating the movement from my hip. Think of that ball and socket joint, right? You're rolling the ball around in the socket. And you can go a little further into your endpoints as you start to move. Also notice the speed with which you're moving. Not too fast, the slower the better, because your brain's paying attention, hopefully. And you can switch the direction. The slower you go, the more that your brain can soak up the information. Just finding your range of motion in the hip. And that's a big part of it, is all these muscles have to work in conjunction, right? They have to make friends with one another. It's not fair if one set of muscles is always doing the work to stabilize your pelvis. And then we'll relax that right leg down, foot to the floor. So now you'll want to widen your feet out to the edges of the mat or outside of your hips. And we're going to work with the right leg. Just feel the big toe side of your right foot. And if you want to do it to your breath, as you breathe in, press that right knee. So first you're going to push into your foot. Push into your foot, the big toe side of the foot. Press the kneecap forward, sort of forward into the middle of the mat, and then exhale and come out. So you're bringing that thigh bone inward, so to the middle of the mat, medially reaching and coming back. And you can even initiate from the foot, press into the arch of the foot in the big toe side. But what we know with somatics too is that we want to be able to make the same movement from different muscles. So right now I'm having you do it from your leg. Now let's see if we can make the same movement from your hip. So initiate from your hip, keep your leg quiet and relaxed. Push that right hip, lift it up, or you can feel yourself take your weight into the left hip, pressing left hip into the ground, lifting right hip away from the ground. One of the ways that we can find ourselves moving in somatics is notice what part of your body is pushing into the earth, so the left hip, and what part is pulling away, the right hip. And then we come back and just land. There's no pushing or pulling. And that's a really good way to help your nervous system to remap. As you start to open up more, you can come deeper into that big toe side of the foot, even lifting the pinky toe side and coming back. The other thing it's good to note is that I'm doing my best to keep my left leg still. I don't want to drop my left leg open into windshield wipers. I actually want to try to keep the knee pointing upward. So there's more of a, not only a rotation of the pelvis, but a lengthening of that right side of the pelvis. And then the option to add the arm is there. So as you inhale, you could reach your right arm overhead. I like to roll my head towards my right shoulder. Exhale back. If you don't want to do it to your breath, you don't have to. But as you breathe in, there's an opportunity to think, breathe into your right rib cage. That's going to create even more space. The posture is a container for your breath. And then we breathe into that space. Inhale, reaching, lengthening whole right side. Feel it through your thigh bone, your outer hip. Exhale, relaxing, or taking a few where you're moving slower. Take it to your end point.
Breathe at that end point. Feel yourself from the outer right knee all the way through the wrist crease. And then it might be more of a slow release. That's the important part. We want to feel those muscles come back to their neutral position. Nothing going on there. Just let them relax. Now we'll do the twist on that side. So with the twist, the left leg is going to go out long. If you find there's pulling in the low back, if it arches away from the floor, bend your knee, put something, a pillow, anything underneath your left knee. And then the right foot, if it's available, it can sit on the thigh or the shin, or you can just keep it on the floor. You can use your left hand, but I'm not using my left hand to pull the leg over. I'm using the leg to bring the leg over, the right hip. And then I'm going to inhale into the rotation. So it's like I'm stacking my right hip on top of my left, rolling onto my left hip, and exhaling back. Inhaling, and you want to try to keep you may find that you have tightness in the pectoral area, right in the front of the shoulder there. That goes on too. So that's part of this whole side body thing too, right? So do your best to keep your shoulder blades relaxed on the ground. So I'm not letting the shoulder lift up. I don't need to go that far. I'm just trying to stack the right hip on top of the left, but keep the shoulders relaxed on the ground. And exhaling back. You could reach your right arm up overhead again as you come into the rotation. Breathing out. Also that opportunity to do a little self-adjustment with your left hand. You can take your left hand and gently press that hip crease forward, so like you're making space in the front of the hip crease and the outer hip as you're in the twist. Exhale, release that. And letting go. Opportunity to just stop and be still if that's what you need right now. But explore creating some space through that right side. Last one. All right. Take a moment. We're going to be coming onto our right side body. So I'm going to turn towards you, but take a moment to pause again and feel both sides. Again, the importance of the pause. Feeling yourself. How do the two sides of your body feel now? Is there equal weight in both sides of the pelvis, or does one side feel more lifted than the other? And so you can probably just roll over, but I am going to transition onto my right side. This next part we do is more of what we call pandiculation, which means we're going to tighten into the muscles that might already be tight and then do a release of those muscles. So coming onto my right side, you can keep your right knee bent wherever it wants to be, but we're going to take the left leg and we're going to lengthen it out. And then you're going to lift your heel up towards the sky, turn your toes down towards the floor. So you're internally rotating that thigh, just like when we were standing at the wall in the beginning. And then lift the leg up, draw the top of the foot towards your shin. So what you should feel is that outer hip line engaging, outer thigh line. So that internal rotation, and then you can also think of plugging the thigh into the hip. So there's this lifting of the left waist towards the armpit. We want to engage that whole side. So not just the leg, but the whole side. And then we just hold it there and pulsate. Just tiny little pulsations. And tiny little pulsations doesn't always mean there's not lots to feel, right? So what do you feel in that outer hip line? Making sure you're keeping your left hip stacked on top of the right. It's not falling forward or back. So keep it stacked. You can even keep a hand on that left hip. But internally rotating. And you can play around with turning the toe a little bit more forward versus downward. See where you can really catch that outer band. We'll do a few more pulsations, and then we're going to very slowly, slowly, slowly let it fall down. And let it completely relax for a few breaths. Probably wants to anyhow, right? And I'm just letting the knee collapse wherever it lands. We're going to do that again with the option of adding a little more contraction through the side body. And if this in any way aggravates your neck, you're not going to lift your head up, but the option is there. So you're going to internally rotate the leg again. Plug the thigh bone into the hip. So imagine drawing the hip up towards your armpit. Now take your hand and reach your hand towards your foot. So we're really contracting that side. And this is the first part. I could just do that and pulsate, or I can lift my head up, even adding the side muscles, the neck muscles. Watch that your head's not forward, so take the soft palate back and align your ear with your shoulder. So crown of the head forward. If that, like I said, if it aggravates your neck, then just keep your head down here on a pillow. So I'm pulsating. I feel this whole left side tightening. I want to breathe into that tightness, be aware of it. And then this time on the release, let everything fall and relax. And we're going to take it into a little bit deeper stretch. So we can take the left hand, fingertips, and imagine that you're like little spiders. And you're just going to start to crawl that hand overhead. Just explore. Crawling, but when I'm reaching or crawling my hand, I think my arm bone is plugged into my side body. So I'm not reaching the arm, I'm crawling my hand up and bringing my waist with it. So I'll feel my left waist lift up. Lifting that left waist, and then I might even slightly stretch through that left leg, reaching my toes. So I'm purposely creating a long side, what we'd say is actually tension through the left side. But I'm going to find that and then see if I can release into that. We're going to do that one more time. Bring the arm back down. So we go into the contraction first. Lift that left leg up. Roll the toes down towards the floor. Heel upward. Internal rotation. Press through the heel. Draw the top of the foot towards the shin. And then plug the thigh in, or think of bringing the hip. Your hip is coming towards your armpit. And you could just pulsate there. You could reach the arm to shorten the side body more. So it's like your armpit and your hip are trying to touch. You can also lift the head. And just feel that whole side tightening up, right? Fortunately, this is not what we feel when we have tightness through one side. So we're contracting beyond that point of tightness. It all counts because it's still moving the muscles. And then we slowly, you can release the head, the leg, just let it fall first, and maybe that's all you want to do. Or you can add that intentional stretch, taking your fingers, tenting them, slowly crawling them overhead. Try to keep the arms straight. You can stop wherever you want, and not just the arm, so it's not like the arm's pulling out of the shoulder socket. As my arm gets higher overhead, I'm going to lift my ribs off the ground. My right ribs are going to lift, left ribs up towards the sky. I could do just that, feeling more stretch to the side body. Or I can also lengthen through the leg, reaching my toes. Take a few breaths there. And then again, if you're actively stretching it, let it go, because the IT band doesn't need you to actively stretch it. In fact, it wants you to relax the muscles. If you're familiar with the practice of yin yoga, it works on the premise that when we relax the muscles, the connective tissue can get hydrated. We get deeper into the connective tissue, which is the IT band. So relaxing for a few more breaths. And taking the arm down. You can pause on your side. These pauses are really important in somatics if you're not used to them. Maybe again, noticing I like to come into a fetal curl, do a couple undulations for the spine. If you'd rather roll onto your back, you can do that and hug your knees into your chest. But we'll be switching sides. Maybe pausing again to notice the two sides. You can use your left arm underneath your head or use a pillow. And then I'm going to lengthen my left leg just a little bit. I don't want to take it all the way long because it gets kind of tippy and then my hip falls. So bend in the left knee. You're going to lift up your right leg this time and think of lifting it from your hip. Turn your toe downward, toes downward, heel upward. So internally rotating the thigh. And I'm not way up here either. I'm just kind of keeping the heel at the height of the hip and just pulsating. And I'm also plugging the thigh bone into the hip and the hip into my side body. So you should feel that line that's like a stripe on the outer thigh. And the thing too with the IT band is we want it to be strong. We want it to stabilize us. We just don't want it to stay chronically tight. So pulsating, you might turn your toes slightly more forward, see where you get more of that feel. Everybody's a little different in how much rotation you need inward. And then slowly let the leg drop down. Let it completely relax. So it's not like you can just feel the weight of the right hip fall onto the left hip. Take a few breaths there. And then we'll do that again. Lifting up, toes inward. So this time, as you do the pulsation, if you want to add the arm to it, you can reach your right arm towards your hip. So you're really pulling your armpit towards your hip and your hip towards your armpit. Shorten that right side body. Head can stay down, or you can lift your head up. Remember not to let your chin come forward though. Keep your neck in a neutral position, so we're using those muscles through this side, the right side of the neck. So the whole right side is tight, even the neck if you're lifting the head. And feel into that. Even tiny little pulsations. When you're ready to release, come down slow. So it's a voluntary release, meaning slow, feeling it all the way down to that last 10%. Letting go. And then if we want to add that purposeful stretch, come onto your right fingertips, tentum. Begin to slide that arm overhead. As you slide your arm, think of lifting your right waist up towards the sky, left waist, to get the arm overhead. You could do just that, stretching the side out, breathing into your right lung, or maybe also reaching through the right leg. Be active at first, so you have to use the muscles to find the stretch, and then just release. Let that right inner knee fall. Let your arm fall. Breathe into the length of the right side. Breathe into your right lung. Slide the hand back down. Slide the leg in. We'll do all that one more time. Sometimes you'll find with the IT band that maybe just one or two of these different movements or practices works best for you. So do it as a set and then see what was really your best movement for your body. So we turn that left or right foot inward, toe down, lifting the heel just about to the height of the hip. We're pulsating the leg, plugging the thigh bone into the hip, drawing the hip towards the armpit. Fingers can reach towards the hip. If you want to add the head, reach the crown of the head forward, shorten that whole side body. Think of the space from your right ear all the way to your outer ankle bone. Like if you could touch your right ear to your ankle bone. If you can, let me know. No, but shorten that side. And notice too how it's hard to breathe, right? When we're like this into that right side. That might tell you a little bit of what happens too with our respiration when we hold tightness, these full body patterns and one side is tighter. So we're holding that space and that slow, easeful, controlled release. Oh, I forgot to take my arm overhead that time. Sorry. You can also do that. Take your arm overhead and then release. Remember that the release is more important than the activation, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to release muscles. We're not trying to build or strengthen muscles. So that's the focus. All right. And then I'm going to take myself up, and we mentioned we're going to finish with a little bit of myofascial movement, and that's what's next. So I do this with a rolled yoga mat because not everybody has a ball at home, and I actually love doing it that way. So I'm going to show it with a rolled yoga mat. I'll also show it with the ball, if it doesn't roll away from me. So I'm going to take my rolled up yoga mat, and I'm going to put it across whatever surface you got underneath you there. And when we come down on it, we're trying to take it right to the kind of the front of the hips here. So right here, and then we're going to end up rolling down the thighs. But across the front of the pelvis, right about at the hip crease. So I'm going to take my weight down into that. And the first thing I need to be able to do again is to land and locate or relax. So let the weight of your body fall down, let your hips fall into that mat. And this is why I like to use the mat, is because I can actually address both hips at the same time initially. And let the tops of the feet relax onto the ground. If you want to cross opposite hand to elbow, however your head is most comfortable, do that. I'm just trying to keep my head in a position where the microphone is still working for you guys, but relax your head. And then I just want you to breathe into your belly if you can. You should have a little more space to breathe into your belly. It's not completely compressed. But notice where it is compressed, where that mat is. And then just start to shift your hips side to side. So I mentioned that the hip bone, you can feel your hip bones perhaps. That's where we want to be. You want to be able to feel your hip bones on that mat. If you can think of the area right behind where you feel your hip bones on the mat, that's where the TFL attaches, is to the back of the hip. So removing the front of the hip, but just visualize that space. Just rocking side to side. You can also do this by bending your knees and rocking your feet from side to side. But I'm more right on the hip bones themselves, just gently rocking side to side. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to scoot my body towards the front of the mat so it's more right on the hip creases, less on the bone. And same thing, I'm just going to kind of roll out the tops of the thighs first, so the front of the hip flexors. And then when we're ready, so I can face you, I'll do my left side first. I'm going to stop, let my legs drop, and I'm going to begin to roll onto the left side. And you're going to have to use your arms to support yourself. So I can go onto the left side, and I can actually start out at the hip. But then what you really want to try to do too is go, so this is because now we're getting into that fascial tissue, which is more along the outer thigh, right? It goes all the way down to your knee. It stabilizes your knee. So you can start at the outer hip and just kind of give it a little roll. Sometimes I lay down when I do this, and I can go back and forth and side to side. So as I'm on the hip, on the pelvis itself, you're more at the muscle attachment point. But the benefit of doing it lying down too is that notice if you can relax your top leg, notice the stretch through that outer right hip, right? Because we've got that mat underneath us, and that's why I like this. If you really are comfortable with more of a stretch, then you can substitute, when we go into the side, you can substitute a ball underneath that left hip. But what you often see is people holding themselves up like this, doing their myofascial rolling. I think that's great if you want to get more motion. You can be up on your arm here. But what I find is myofascial doesn't need to include movement. A lot of times it's just the compression and the stillness. So if I can just lay on it and let that hip, the top hip relax too, then that's benefiting from a stretch. Breathing into that. So you've got compression in that bottom left hip, and then that stretching through the top right hip. And then you can work, so either with the mat or the ball, work your way down that, think of having a stripe in your outer thigh, right? So you can move yourself down that outer thigh. I'm using the ball now, but again, you can be using the mat. Drop the hips again. So just exploring. I'm going to go back to the mat to show you if I were working my way down the leg, I can just kind of roll. It doesn't have to be, one of the things, the mistakes I think that people make with myofascial is they overdo it, and there's actually pain and discomfort. And remember, what we're trying to do is send your nervous system the message to relax these areas, not make it more hypervigilant. So if you're feeling pain, if you're using those spiked balls or going too deep, that's creating more of that pain protection, right? That's what pain is protection. So just relaxing into it. A lot of times just being still. Yeah, I just found a spot right there. So we find those trigger points. And when you're still and you drop down, you're going to feel the stretch through the top hip as well. So right now I've got that outer left thigh IT band, and I can feel it all the way in the back of my right hip, even all my glute muscles. And then we'll finish this off with doing the other side. So if you want to flip around, you can. Or you can, last time we started from, I'm flipping so you can see me, but remember we started from being on the pelvis. That opportunity is there again. I'm having all kinds of things going on with my leg today. So starting from the pelvis, and then you can roll onto your right hip and go right in the outer right hip first, where you kind of feel the bone. You can go back and forth, side to side. So I'm up on my arm at the moment. Generally, we can create a little more motion that way. But then take the time to settle in, because as you fall down, you're not only going to feel the compression in the right hip, you're going to feel that nice stretch in your outer left hip. But it's really easeful. Feel it all the way down your leg line. Just let that left leg drop. If it feels really good, you can let it drop all the way. And then with the ball, if you want to switch to the ball, you can, or with the mat, start to work your way down that outer leg line. It's just like it. I think of our body as telling us stories, especially the fascial tissue. It's got a story to tell you. And it doesn't want to scream at you. It wants to tell a nice, peaceful story. Sensation is real and it's there, but letting it speak in a way that it can release itself as opposed to aggravating itself. And you can just rest down. Each time I take that mat a little bit further down the thigh, it gives that top-legged a different stretch as well. Now I'm going to move down one more time. A little bit of movement. Again, you can be doing this on your ball if you'd rather. If you've got a ball, just make sure it's soft enough that you're breathing comfortably. And perhaps relaxing into the compression. You'll know too, that's the thing, if you're tightening in your jaws or your shoulders, your arms, that's the other thing we'll see when we go too far in a myofascial release, is that there will be tension showing up somewhere else in the body because your body's trying to protect you. Just let it relax. This is actually one of my favorite ways to use the yoga mat for myofascial release. All right, that's it. For those days when my mat doesn't actually get unrolled, it's just a trick. I'm really doing nice things like this to my body. So we're coming back up and we're going to finish with one last movement, and that is what we call the Z-sit. And I like this one just to kind of get the whole pelvis realigned. You're going to bring your left leg out to your side, and you can either be on the top of the foot or the big toe side, depending on your internal rotation of that thigh. And then bring your right heel to the front of the left knee. So we're creating kind of a Z pattern with the knees. And then pause for a moment. So if you're tighter, you're going to find yourself like this, because this is internally rotating that left thigh. So you can keep your hands on the ground, just keep letting that left hip fall without pushing it down. Just keep letting it fall. So just sometimes just sitting in this seated position is enough. But if you can sit in it and take some small undulations with the spine, that's where we're going. So you can take your hands to your hip crease. As you breathe out, it's like doing a cat-cow. Draw your heart back and your chin towards your chest. So round your spine. As you breathe in, arch your spine, bring your heart forward, your elbows back. So I'm moving my spine, but I'm also trying to move my pelvis. You can even feel the difference between initiating from your head and your shoulders. That might feel good. But then try to move from your pelvis. Initiate this movement, rocking the pelvis. Think of it like a bowl, tilting it forward and then back. And you might feel that in the outer hips. Back and forth. And then finally, and this one really is more of a sacral reset, but I find it really helps with my IT bands, where you take the right hand to the ground, and you can keep your left hand on your hip. So now you're going to inhale and lift up the left butt cheek. You're going to lift it up and feel these outer hip and thigh muscles tighten. So you're contracting into it as you rotate. And then exhale, drop them down and stretch them. So this one gets a little bit more into the muscle, into that TFL muscle, stretching it, and also into your little glutes. Exhaling, dropping. So I'm lifting I'm going to engage these muscles in the outer hip to lift up and rotate. And then exhale, drop down. And again, we get that rotational movement too of the pelvis, which can be really helpful when you have a full body imbalance. A lot of times that can extend all the way into your sacrum. So this is a sacral reset. Last one. And then back to the center. You can swing your legs out in front of you for a moment, shake them out, and we'll finish on the second side. So legs will go out to the right. You can either be on the top of the right foot or big toe side. See how your hip wants to roll your thigh in, how far, and then bring the left heel up by the right knee. So if you're more like this, falling into that left hip, pause there for a moment. You can hold yourself up with your hands and see if you can just start to let the right hip fall down. Don't force it. Just let it fall. You may just sit here, and that's what we got today. If you have a little bit of movement, take your hands to your hips and exhale into like your cat pose, rounding your spine. Inhale forward into cow. And it's usually fairly easy to move your head, certainly your neck, and your shoulders, but focus on making this motion from your pelvis. So even if it's slight, tilt your pelvis forward. You'll feel yourself come onto the front of your sit bones, and then tilt your pelvis back, feel yourself come onto the tailbone or even onto the sacrum. And then let the rest of the spine just follow along. So that's part of breaking down when we have pain in our body. A lot of times it's from habitual movements, and we get very rigid in our movement. So we can learn to make the same movement with different muscle groups. I'm learning to make this movement from my pelvis. Last one. And then that left hand comes to the ground, supports you. You're going to keep your right hand at the hip. You can even feel that area in the outer right hip and squeeze those muscles, and then lift it up as you breathe in and rotate. Bring your right shoulder over your left knee. Exhale, drop it down and relax it. So there's the stretch. Inhale, you're engaging it. Or rolling. And you might also feel that left hip. I'm feeling that one as well. And exhale, drop down. So tighten and draw that right hip forward and rotate it. Exhale back down. Moving at a pace that's good for you, always. So sometimes this one on its own will reset. It's meant to be a sacral reset, pelvic reset, but it really helps to bring my hips in alignment when my outer hips feel like they've been overworked. And you can take your legs out, jelly roll them around. I invite you to please take whatever relaxation you'd like. If you have the time to lay on your back, we're going to take a minute together, but take more time, take as much time as you need, just to let yourself land and locate. Maybe breathe some warmth into your pelvis, particularly your outer hips, and let that warmth melt down your legs, through the tops of the thighs, the outer thighs, even the backs of the thighs. goal in offering you these practices is that they will allow you to do the things that bring you joy in life. So I hope that they do. I hope that you can keep running or walking or whatever it is you do without pain, without discomfort. Thank you for joining me today. Peace, joy, love, and light.